If your brother knew I was standing here asking you this, I am pretty sure he would never let me live it down. Ethan Walker said it so calmly that, for one ridiculous second, I thought he was joking. Rain drummed against the narrow awning outside Miller's Coffee, turning the sidewalk into a mirror of yellow streetlights and passing headlights. I had been halfway to my car when Ethan stepped out behind me and called my name. Now he stood 3 feet away, hands tucked into the pockets of his charcoal jacket, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. Asking me what? I said. Ethan glanced through the coffee shop window before looking directly at me again. Go to dinner with me Friday. I blinked. Dinner? Yes. You and me? A small smile appeared. That is generally how I imagined it. My heart suddenly seemed determined to make itself noticeable. Ethan was 27, 5 years older than me, and had been Ryan's best friend since high school. For most of my life, his name had automatically followed my brothers. Ryan and Ethan. Baseball games, weekend cookouts, road trips, Sunday football. Ethan had practically grown up inside our family. He knew which cabinet my mother kept the coffee mugs in and which floorboard outside Ryan's room squeaked. When I was younger, he called me Bennett Jr. and stole French fries from my plate just to annoy me. But I was 22 now, recently home from college, and somewhere along the way Ethan had stopped looking at me like Ryan's kid brother. I had noticed. I had simply been too afraid to decide what it meant. You are asking me on a date, I said. Ethan nodded. An actual date. Yes, Noah. Hearing my name in his voice made the rain seem quieter. Does Ryan know? That was when Ethan's expression changed. He looked toward the parking lot, then back at me. No, I folded my arms. So your plan is to secretly date your best friend's brother? My plan was to ask you to dinner. I have not developed the 5-year strategy yet. I laughed before I could stop myself. Ethan relaxed slightly. If you are uncomfortable, say no, he added. Nothing changes. I mean that. There was no pressure in his voice, only an honesty that somehow made the decision harder. I could walk away and preserve the simple version of our lives. Ethan would remain Ryan's best friend. I would remain the younger brother who had come home trying to figure out adulthood. Nobody would have to explain anything. Why me? I asked. Ethan went quiet. Because you came home different. Different how? You grew into yourself. His eyes held mine, and I started noticing things I probably should not have noticed. My pulse jumped. That sounds dangerously vague. I am trying very hard not to make this worse. You are doing an impressive job. He laughed softly, and the tension between us shifted into something warmer. I looked past him toward the familiar coffee shop, then toward my car. Home was only 3 miles away. Ryan was probably sitting on the couch watching baseball, completely unaware that his best friend was changing the shape of my Friday night. Maybe more than Friday night. 7 o'clock, I said. Ethan stared at me. Is that a yes? It is a yes. His surprised smile made my stomach flip. I will pick you up. Absolutely not. Ryan knows your truck. Right. We stood there laughing at the absurdity of our first problem before our first date had even happened. Finally, I started toward my car. I will meet you here Friday. 7, Ethan said. I opened my door, then looked back. Ethan, yeah. How long do you expect us to keep this from Ryan? His smile faded just slightly. I do not know. That should have worried me more than it did. Instead, I climbed into my car with rain sparkling across the windshield and one impossible thought repeating in my head. I had just said yes to the one person I had spent years believing I was never supposed to see that way. By the time I reached home, I had replayed Ethan's question so many times that I could hear every pause in his voice. Ryan was stretched across the living room couch watching the Red Sox, exactly where I had expected him to be, with an empty pizza box on the coffee table and one sock missing for reasons I did not want explained. You were gone a while, he said without looking away from the television. Miller's was busy. The lie came out smoothly enough to make me uncomfortable. You want pizza? Maybe later. I headed upstairs before my face could betray me. In my childhood bedroom, half-unpacked boxes still lined the wall beneath old baseball trophies and photographs I had never bothered taking down. Coming home after college was supposed to be temporary, just long enough to find a publishing job and save money for an apartment. Instead, 3 weeks had passed, and I still felt suspended between the person I used to be and whoever I was supposed to become. Ethan had noticed that before anyone else. I sat on the edge of my bed and thought back to the cookout 2 weeks earlier. The first moment I realized something between us had shifted. Ryan had invited friends over on a warm Saturday evening. The backyard smelled like grilled burgers and fresh-cut grass, and everyone seemed determined to ask me the same questions. Where was I applying? When was I moving out? Did I have a 5-year plan? By the fourth conversation, I felt like graduation had somehow turned me into a disappointing job interview. I slipped away to the back porch with a soda and watched fireflies flicker beyond the fence. A minute later, the screen door opened. Ethan stepped outside carrying 2 plates. "You disappeared," he said. I escaped. He handed me 1 plate. Cheeseburger, mustard, pickles, no onions. I stared at it. "How did you know? You have ordered burgers that way since high school. You remember my burger order from high school?" Ethan leaned against the railing. "I remember things." There was something about the way he said it that made me look at him differently. He wore an old Red Sox cap, gray t-shirt, and jeans, nothing unusual. Yet suddenly he seemed less like a permanent extension of Ryan and more like someone I had never actually taken the time to know. "So," he said, "how are you really doing?" "Apparently, I need a career, an apartment, retirement savings, and a complete life plan before Labor Day." Ethan smiled. "Sounds exhausting. Everyone keeps asking what comes next. You do not have to know yet." I looked at him. That is the first time anyone has said that. His expression softened. "You are 22, Noah. You just finished college. You are allowed to be uncertain." The knot in my chest loosened slightly. Ryan thinks I need a spreadsheet. Ryan thinks spreadsheets can solve emotional problems. I laughed. "You are an accountant." Which is how I know they cannot. For a while, we stood there talking while voices drifted through the open windows behind us. I told Ethan I wanted to work in publishing, even though every unanswered application made the dream feel less realistic. He listened without interrupting. Then Ryan called his name from inside. Ethan turned toward the door, but paused. "For what it is worth, I think you are going to be fine. You sound very confident." "I am." His eyes stayed on mine a second longer than necessary. That was the moment. Nothing dramatic happened. Nobody confessed anything. Ethan simply looked at me as if I were not Ryan's younger brother, not a confused college graduate, not someone who needed fixing. Just Noah. Then Ryan called again, and Ethan stepped inside. I remained on the porch, suddenly aware that an invisible line had existed between us for years. Neither of us crossed it that night, but for the first time, I wondered what might happen if we did. Friday arrived with the strange ability to make every ordinary hour feel suspicious. At breakfast, Ryan asked why I had changed shirts twice, and I told him the first one had coffee on it. That was technically true, although I had spilled the coffee after deciding I hated the shirt. At 6:30, I grabbed my jacket and keys. "Going somewhere?" Ryan asked from the couch. "Dinner with someone from college." Another lie. I was getting better at them, which was not exactly comforting. "Have fun," he said. "Do not stay out too late." I am 22. I know. I was there for several of those years. I left before he could become more curious and drove the 3 miles to Miller's Coffee. Ethan was waiting in his truck at the far end of the parking lot. When he saw me, he lowered the window. "Follow me." That sounds completely normal and not suspicious at all. He smiled. "Trust me." 20 minutes later, we pulled into a small roadside diner outside town, far enough away that running into anyone Ryan knew seemed unlikely. Inside, red vinyl booths lined the windows, an old jukebox stood near the entrance, and handwritten pie specials covered a board behind the counter. Ethan chose a booth near the back. "You planned this carefully," I said. "I wanted somewhere quiet. You wanted somewhere Ryan would not appear." Both things can be true. A waitress handed us menus, but Ethan barely opened his. "Cheeseburger," he asked. "Mustard, pickles, no onions." I stared at him. "You are starting to make the burger thing weird." "I am attentive." "You are unsettlingly attentive." He laughed, and suddenly the nervousness I had carried all day began to fade. Once our food arrived, we talked for nearly 2 hours. Not about Ryan. Not about family history. Not about all the years Ethan had known me as someone younger and easier to define. He asked about publishing, and when I admitted that I had received another rejection that morning, he did not tell me everything happened for a reason. He simply said, "That one was not yours. You make disappointment sound very organized." "Accountant." "Right. Occupational hazard." I asked about his work, expecting him to say he liked it. Instead, Ethan admitted that he sometimes imagined leaving the accounting firm and opening a small bookkeeping business of his own. "Why have you never told Ryan?" I asked. Ethan looked down at his coffee. Ryan thinks I like stability. Do you? I like knowing where the ground is. His eyes lifted to mine. That does not mean I never wonder what is on the other side of the fence. Something about the sentence felt like it was no longer about work. I looked away first. When we finally stepped outside, the parking lot was almost empty and the summer air had cooled. Ethan walked me toward my car, but stopped several feet away, giving me room instead of assuming anything. Was this strange? He asked. A little. His expression fell. Not bad strange, I added. Just different. Different I can handle. I leaned against my car door. How long have you wanted to do this? Ethan went quiet. Long enough to know asking was probably going to complicate things. That is not an answer. I noticed you differently when you came home. At the cookout. He smiled faintly. Before that. My heart skipped. How much before? Ethan looked at me with that same careful expression from the porch. Long enough to realize I needed to wait until I understood what I was feeling. The answer was thoughtful rather than dramatic, and somehow that mattered more. Can I see you again? He asked. I smiled. Yes. Relief crossed his face. Then I added, but we cannot keep inventing stories forever. Ethan's smile faded slightly. I know. I wanted to believe him. As I drove home beneath the dark summer sky, I realized the first date had answered one question and created another. I knew I wanted to see Ethan again. What I did not know was how long something this good could stay hidden before secrecy started changing it. The second date should have felt easier, but by Thursday evening I had learned that liking Ethan was the easy part. Pretending I did not like him whenever Ryan was around was exhausting. Ethan and I met at a bookstore about 15 miles outside town, where nobody knew us well enough to ask questions. We wandered through the shelves for nearly an hour, arguing quietly about mystery novels until Ethan finally bought the one I recommended. If this is terrible, I am blaming you, he said. That is fine. I will simply stop giving you good advice. Afterward, we got coffee and talked until the employees started stacking chairs nearby. Outside, a summer storm had covered the parking lot in silver sheets of rain. Ethan offered to drive me home, so I left my car and climbed into his truck. By the time we reached my neighborhood, the rain had softened, but neither of us wanted Ryan seeing Ethan drop me off after 10 o'clock. 2 blocks away, I said. I know. Ethan parked beneath a maple tree where the streetlights barely reached us. The engine went quiet, leaving only the soft rhythm of rain against the roof. I had a good time, Ethan said. You already told me that twice. I want to make sure you believe me. I smiled. I believe you. Neither of us reached for the door. For the first time all evening, there was nothing left to distract us. No bookshelves, no coffee cups, no waitress. Just Ethan sitting beside me, close enough that I could see the uncertainty behind his calm expression. His hand rested near mine on the center console. Noah, he said softly. What? Tell me if this is moving too fast. My heartbeat quickened. You spent an hour comparing hardcover prices before buying one book. I do not think moving too fast is your problem. He laughed, then looked at me again. The humor faded into something quieter. I knew what he was asking without either of us saying it. I shifted slightly toward him. Ethan did the same. For one suspended moment, it felt as though the entire complicated world outside the truck had disappeared. Then his phone rang. Ethan glanced at the screen, and his expression changed immediately. Ryan. The name landed between us like a reminder. Ethan answered. Hey. Ryan's voice carried through the quiet truck. Where are you? Heading home. Ethan looked at me as he said it. You want to stop by? Ryan asked. I have leftover pizza. Noah disappeared somewhere tonight, too. I turned toward the rain-streaked passenger window. Not tonight, Ethan said. Long day. They talked for another minute about Saturday plans and baseball. Every ordinary word made me feel more invisible. When Ethan ended the call, he placed his phone face down. I am sorry. You did not do anything. That is not true. I looked at him. We agreed to keep this quiet. For now. There it was again. The phrase that had sounded temporary after our first date. Tonight it sounded like a door with no clear way through. Ethan reached across the console and gently took my hand. I am not ashamed of being here with you. Then what are you afraid of? He stared at our joined hands. Changing something I have spent 12 years building. I knew he meant his friendship with Ryan. I understood why it mattered. What I did not understand was where that left me. Eventually, something has to change, I said. Ethan looked up. I know. This time, I was not sure he did. I stepped out of the truck and walked the final 2 blocks through the light rain, carrying the warmth of his hand and the cold weight of everything he still could not say. By the time I reached home, I understood something I had not considered before. A secret could make a new relationship feel exciting at first, but if you kept it hidden long enough, eventually one person started wondering whether he was the secret or the problem. Saturday afternoon should have been ordinary. Ethan came over around 3 with sodas, sandwiches, and the same relaxed expression he always wore around Ryan. I was at the kitchen table sending out another round of publishing applications when he placed a wrapped sandwich beside my laptop. "Turkey, extra pickles, no tomatoes," he said. I looked up. "You remembered." "Of course." Ryan, standing near the refrigerator, turned toward us. "Since when do you know his sandwich order?" Ethan hesitated for barely a second. "Since forever." Ryan looked offended. "I am his brother, and I did not know that." "That sounds like a personal failure," Ethan said. Ryan laughed, and the moment passed, but I noticed the quick glance Ethan gave me afterward. That was becoming our weakness. We had learned how to arrive separately and avoid suspicious messages, but neither of us had learned how to stop looking at the other person. During the baseball game, Ethan sat beside Ryan on the couch while I took the armchair across the room. Every few minutes, our eyes met. Once, I smiled without thinking. Ethan smiled back. Ryan followed his gaze toward me. "What are you two smiling about?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. Ryan narrowed his eyes. "That looked like something." "The game," Ethan said. "Nothing funny happened in the game. Maybe Noah has finally developed an appreciation for baseball." "Now I know you are lying," Ryan said. An hour later, Ryan stepped outside to answer a work call. Ethan immediately turned toward me. "You are wearing my jacket." I glanced down at the navy jacket I had borrowed after leaving my car at the bookstore Thursday night. "I forgot to give it back." "Keep it. That seems dangerous." "It looks better on you." I smiled. "That definitely seems dangerous." The back door opened before Ethan could answer. Ryan walked in, stopped, and looked directly at my jacket. "Wait, is that yours?" he asked Ethan. My stomach tightened. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Noah borrowed it." Ryan looked at me. "When?" Ethan answered before I could. "Last weekend." The lie was smooth, but I hated hearing it. Ryan studied us for another moment before returning to the couch. Later, I went upstairs to put away laundry. On my way back down, I heard Ryan and Ethan talking quietly near the kitchen. "Can I ask you something?" Ryan said. I stopped on the staircase. "Sure. Is something going on with Noah?" Silence followed. My heartbeat became painfully noticeable. This was the moment Ethan had said would eventually come. He did not have to explain everything. He only had to stop pretending there was nothing worth explaining. "No," Ethan said. The single word landed harder than I expected. Ryan lowered his voice. "Really? Because you two have been acting strange. You are imagining things." I stared at the wall beside me. That second sentence hurt more than the first. It turned our dinners, conversations, joined hands, and everything growing between us into something imaginary. Ryan laughed lightly. "All right. I was just asking." I quietly returned upstairs before either of them saw me. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Ethan had sent a message asking where I went. Then another appeared. He said he was sorry. I stared at the screen without replying. Downstairs, I could hear Ryan and Ethan talking again, their friendship settling comfortably back into place as if nothing had changed. Maybe for them, nothing had. I sat on the edge of my bed wearing Ethan's jacket and finally understood why secrecy had begun to feel so different. At first, hiding had belonged to both of us. Now it felt like Ethan had a life he was protecting, while I had become the part of that life he was willing to deny. I did not answer Ethan that night. By Sunday afternoon, his apology was still sitting on my phone, along with 3 other messages he had sent and one question asking if we could talk. I finally told him to meet me at Riverside Park at 4. When I arrived, Ethan was already sitting on a bench beneath an oak tree overlooking the river. 2 coffees rested beside him. Even from 20 feet away, I knew which one was mine. That almost made everything worse. "Hey," he said when I approached. "Hey." I stayed standing. Ethan glanced at the coffee, then back at me. "You heard me talking to Ryan." "Every word." His shoulders lowered. "I am sorry. You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." "Then tell me why you did it." Ethan stood, but he did not move closer. I panicked. "You did more than panic. You told Ryan nothing was happening. Then you told him he was imagining things." "I know." When we are alone, you remember my coffee, my food, the books I like, and every stupid detail I forgot I ever told you. Then Ryan walks into the room, and suddenly none of it exists. Ethan looked down. That is not how I feel. Maybe I am just your best friend's little brother when it actually matters. His eyes immediately returned to mine. Noah, no. Then help me understand. Ethan was silent for several seconds. The river moved quietly behind him, and somewhere across the park, children were laughing near the playground. Finally, he said, 3 years ago, Ryan called me from a hotel near your college. I frowned. Why? You were having a difficult semester. You were overwhelmed and talking about leaving school. Ryan drove almost 200 miles because he was worried about you. I remembered that weekend. Ryan had appeared with groceries and claimed he happened to have free time. I had never believed the excuse. He called me afterward, Ethan continued. He said he hated seeing you struggle because he could not solve it for you. I told him you did not need someone controlling your life. You needed people who would support you while you figured it out. Ethan paused. Ryan asked me to promise that if you ever trusted me the way you trusted him, I would never become another person who made your life harder. My anger shifted into confusion. And you think dating me breaks that promise? I did not know. Ethan, I said yes. I know. I am 22 years old. Ryan does not decide who I date. I know that too. Then why are you acting like caring about me is something you need to apologize for? Ethan looked toward the river. Because Ryan has trusted me for 12 years. Your family has trusted me. When you came home and I realized my feelings had changed, I kept wondering whether acting on them meant I was taking advantage of that trust. I stepped closer. You asked me to dinner. You gave me the choice. That is not taking advantage of me. Ethan met my eyes. I should have trusted you enough to understand that. Yes. The word came out softer than I expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I like you, I said finally. More than I planned to. But I cannot keep doing this if every good moment between us has to disappear whenever Ryan enters the room. Ethan swallowed. What are you asking me to do? I am not asking you to choose between your best friend and me. I looked at the 2 untouched coffees on the bench. I am asking you to stop making me feel like one of us has to be erased so the other relationship can survive. Ethan said nothing, and this time I did not rescue him from the silence. Remembering my coffee order was easy. Knowing my favorite books was easy. What I needed from him now was harder. I needed Ethan to decide whether I belonged in the part of his life that existed in daylight. For 2 days after Riverside Park, Ethan gave me space. I had asked him for honesty, but the silence that followed felt heavier than I expected. Monday passed without his usual morning message. Tuesday reached dinner without a photograph of the terrible coffee from his office. By that evening, I had checked my phone enough times to become annoyed with myself. I finally opened our conversation and typed the one sentence I needed him to understand. I cannot keep being your secret. I read it twice, then sent it before I could change my mind. 5 minutes later, Ethan replied, I know. I am going to fix this. I was still staring at those words when Ryan called from downstairs. Noah, can you come here? Something in his voice made me stop. I found him standing beside the kitchen counter with my phone charger in one hand. You left this down here, he said. Thanks. He did not hand it over immediately. His expression was unusually serious. Ethan is keeping you a secret? My stomach dropped. What? Ryan glanced toward my phone on the counter. Your screen lit up while I was plugging it in. I saw the message preview. I was not trying to read your conversation. For several seconds, I could only stare at him. This was the moment Ethan and I had spent weeks trying to avoid, and somehow it had arrived through a notification on a kitchen counter. Ryan, I can explain. How long? A couple of weeks. He blinked. You and Ethan? Yes. Ryan slowly set the charger down. I prepared myself for anger, questions, maybe a speech about boundaries. Instead, he asked, do you care about him? The question caught me completely off guard. Yes. Does he care about you? I hesitated. Ryan noticed. Noah, I think he does. When we are alone, I know he does. But whenever you are around, he acts like nothing is happening. Ryan's expression changed. So that is why you sent that message. I am tired of feeling like I disappear whenever his friendship with you enters the room. Ryan became quiet, then reached for his phone. What are you doing? Calling Ethan. Ryan, please do not turn this into some huge confrontation. I am not angry at you. 20 minutes later, Ethan's truck pulled directly into the driveway. I stayed near the staircase while Ryan met him in the kitchen. You asked Noah out? Ryan said. Yes. You have been seeing him? Yes. And when I asked you about it Saturday, you lied to me. Ethan paused. Yes. I expected that to be the point Ryan cared about most. It was not. Are you ashamed of him? Ryan asked. Ethan answered immediately. No. Never. Then why are you making him feel like you are? Silence filled the kitchen. I thought I was protecting everyone, Ethan said. You, Noah, our friendship. Ryan exhaled. Do you remember what I asked you 3 years ago? Every word. Then you misunderstood me. I moved one step lower on the staircase. Ryan continued, his voice calmer now. I never asked you to protect Noah from making his own choices. I asked you not to become another person who made his life harder. Ethan said nothing. He is my younger brother, Ryan continued. Of course this is strange for me. You are my best friend. But Noah is 22. He does not need my permission to care about somebody. I could barely process what I was hearing. For weeks, Ethan and I had treated Ryan like a locked door between us. Ryan looked directly at Ethan. If you care about him, then trust him enough to stand beside him when other people can see you. If you cannot do that, leave him alone. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. When he looked up, something in his expression had changed. Then he noticed me standing on the stairs. Our eyes met across the room, and suddenly the truth seemed painfully simple. Ryan had never been the wall between us. The wall was the fear Ethan and I had built while imagining what Ryan might do. Ethan stayed where he was for several seconds after our eyes met, as if crossing the kitchen required more courage than driving 20 miles to a secret diner ever had. Ryan looked between us and sighed. I am going to the living room because apparently both of you need supervision to have one honest conversation. That is not supervision, I said. It is strategic distance. He walked away, leaving Ethan and me beneath the warm kitchen lights. Ethan glanced toward the front window. His truck was parked directly in the driveway, completely visible from the street. I noticed him noticing it. You parked out front, I said. I should have done that from the beginning. Probably. He nodded. I owe you more than an apology. Then do not apologize again. Ethan looked surprised. What should I do? Tell me what changes. He took a breath. Everything that should have been different already. I waited. No more parking 2 blocks away. No more pretending I am somewhere else when Ryan calls. No more acting like you disappear when someone asks a question I am afraid to answer. His voice remained steady, but his expression carried the weight of every mistake he was naming. I convinced myself secrecy was temporary, so I never stopped to think about what it was doing to you. It made me feel like you wanted the private version of me, but not the real one. Ethan lowered his eyes. I know that now. And if Ryan had actually been angry, then I should have listened to him, listened to you, and dealt with the discomfort honestly. He looked at me again. Instead, I made decisions for everyone because I was afraid of losing people. That was the first time Ethan had described the problem without hiding behind loyalty. I stepped off the final stair. Ryan is still your best friend. Yes. I am still his brother. Yes. Those things are not changing. I do not want them to. Ethan glanced toward the living room, where Ryan was deliberately turning the television louder. Then he looked back at me. So, I am going to say this where he can hear it. That sounds dangerous. Apparently, I have developed courage in the last 20 minutes. He raised his voice slightly. Ryan, I am dating your brother. From the living room came an immediate response. I already figured that out. I laughed despite myself. Ethan smiled, but then his expression became serious again. At least, I hope I am. The choice in his words mattered. He was not assuming that one honest conversation erased everything that had happened. He was giving the decision back to me. If you still want this, he said, I want to do it properly. No hiding. No making you feel like something I have to protect people from. He held out his hand, but did not reach for mine. Your choice. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about Miller's coffee, the diner, the bookstore, the truck beneath the maple tree, and the night I had walked 2 blocks home in the rain because being seen felt too dangerous. Then I thought about his truck sitting in our driveway now. It was a small difference, but suddenly it represented everything I had asked for. I placed my hand in his. Friday, I said. Ethan's smile returned slowly. 7 o'clock? 7. I will pick you up here. At the front door. At the front door. Ryan appeared in the living room entrance, saw our joined hands, and made a face that was somewhere between amusement and disbelief. I wanted officially recorded that this is going to be weird for me. You will survive, I said. That is easy for you to say. You did not just discover your best friend has been secretly buying your brother cheeseburgers. Ethan laughed. Ryan shook his head and disappeared again. I looked down at our hands. Nothing dramatic had changed outside that house. The street was the same. The kitchen was the same. Ryan was still Ryan, and Ethan was still his oldest friend. The difference was that nobody was pretending anymore. For the first time since Ethan asked me to dinner, what existed between us did not become smaller when someone else walked into the room. 3 months later, Ethan still picked me up at the front door. At first, Ryan treated every date like an opportunity to remind us that he was adjusting. He would look at the clock when Ethan arrived, ask where we were going, then insist he was not being protective while behaving exactly like an older brother who was being protective. Eventually, even that became ordinary. Ethan came over for Sunday football. Ryan complained when we talked through the game. I complained when they spent 20 minutes debating baseball statistics. Nobody lowered their voice when I entered a room anymore. Nobody invented stories about where they had been. Somewhere along the way, the thing we had been so afraid of simply became part of our lives. I had changed too. After months of applications and rejection emails, I finally accepted an editorial assistant position at a small publishing company about 25 miles from home. On my first morning, Ethan arrived with coffee and a plain blue notebook. On the first page, he had written 4 words, "For whatever comes next." I kept that notebook in my desk drawer. One Saturday afternoon in October, Ethan and I stopped at Miller's Coffee after spending an hour at a used bookstore downtown. Red and gold leaves covered the sidewalk, and the air had that sharp New England chill that made coffee taste better. We took our drinks to the table beside the front window. Ethan looked outside for a moment, then smiled. "What?" I asked. "I was thinking about the first time I asked you to dinner here. You looked terrified." "I thought I looked confident." "You looked like an accountant preparing to announce an audit." Ethan laughed. "And somehow you still said yes." "I make questionable decisions." Apparently. When we finished our coffee, we stepped outside into the bright afternoon. Ethan reached for my hand without thinking about it. That was what I loved most about the gesture now. 3 months earlier, every small touch had required checking who might be watching. Now holding my hand had become instinct. We had made it halfway across the sidewalk when someone called my name. Ryan was leaving the hardware store across the street with a paper bag tucked under one arm. Ethan saw him at the same moment I did. I felt the smallest movement in his fingers, an old reflex telling him to let go before Ryan noticed. I tightened my hand around his. Ethan looked at me. For 1 second, I saw the memory of every hidden dinner, every careful excuse, every time fear had convinced us that being invisible was safer. Then his fingers closed around mine again. Ryan crossed the street and looked deliberately at our joined hands. "You two know phones exist, right?" he asked. "What happened?" I said. "Mom wants everyone at dinner at 6:30. I have been texting both of you." Ethan checked his phone. "Mine is on silent." "So is mine." Ryan shook his head. "You two deserve each other." "You say that like it is an insult," I said. "I am still deciding." He started toward his car, then turned around. 6:30. "Do not make me explain to Mom why you are late." "We will be there," Ethan said. Ryan gave us a small wave and continued across the parking lot. Ethan watched him go. I spent weeks believing that man was going to end our friendship. Instead, he is worried about dinner. I may have overestimated the danger. Slightly. Ethan smiled and squeezed my hand. Looking back at the coffee shop, I finally understood what those first difficult weeks had taught me. Love did not become real because everyone approved of it. It became real when the people inside it were willing to be honest. Ryan had needed to trust me to make my own choices. Ethan had needed to understand that loyalty was not the same thing as avoidance. And I had needed to stop accepting a version of happiness that disappeared whenever somebody else entered the room. We reached Ethan's truck, parked openly near the front of the coffee shop. "Ready?" he asked. I looked at him, then toward the road home. "Yes." Ethan opened the passenger door for me, and a few minutes later we drove toward the Bennett house together. There was no need to stop 2 blocks away. No need to check whether Ryan was watching. Ethan turned directly into the driveway, and for the first time, the most ordinary part of the journey felt like the ending I had wanted all along.